Welcome back to the Time Machine Diaries, the show where we step into the past to bring its lessons into the present. I'm Cullen, your time traveling host. Today, we're taking you to England in 1381, a time when inequality wasn't just tolerated, it was enforced. And at the heart of it all, Wat Tyler. A name you might not know, but one that changed history. Wat Tyler wasn't a king or a knight. He was an ordinary builder, the kind of man history usually overlooks. But when the people in charge pushed too far, Watt stepped up to the plate. He landed one of the first mass uprisings for equality. His story is about rebellion, betrayal, and the enduring fight for justice. But here's the kicker, it's also a story that still resonates. From labor strikes to Occupy Wall Street, Wat Tyler's revolt planted seeds that continue to grow. Grab your pitchforks or your protest signs. Let's march on into the past, huh? When I step out of the time machine, the year is 1381, and England is a mess. The Black Death has nearly wiped out half the population, leaving the survivors to try and pick up the pieces. You think this would lead to better conditions for the working class. After all, if Jim, Paul, and John are all dead, well, shit, now you gotta give me their wages, motherfucker. But it didn't. The people in charge freak out. They pass laws like the Statute of Laborers in 1351, which freezes wages and basically makes peasants slaves to the land. Imagine your boss telling you, no raises, no promotions. Oh, and you can't quit or go home. That's what life was like for English peasants. To make things worse, the government slaps on a poll tax, a flat tax that hits the poor the hardest. Huh, that shit don't change, huh? It's like asking a billionaire and a farmer to pay the same price for dinner. Naturally, people are going to start asking some questions. Like, why the fuck am I paying for a war? We don't want luxuries. We can't even fucking afford them. Enter Wat Tyler. He's a builder from Kent. And when a tax collector assaults his daughter, that's it. I don't blame him. I'd be at that motherfucker's head. He rallies his neighbors, and what starts as a local protest quickly snowballs into a full-scale revolt. I find Wat Tyler in Maidstone, surrounded by farmers, tradesmen, and laborers. He's a big guy, broad-shouldered, his hands callous as a motherfucker. But it's his voice that grabs you. Loud, clear, filled with conviction. We build their homes, harvest their crops, fight their wars, he shouts. What do we get in return? Hunger and chains? Fuck that. The crowd roars its approval. Watt's not just angry, he's strategic. He knows that to make a change, they need to march on London, the heart of power. It reminds me of modern movements like the Civil Rights March on Washington in 1963, or the massive farmer protests in India in 2020. Just like those events, Watt's March is both a cry for justice and a demonstration of solidarity. As Watt and his followers march toward London, Their ranks swell. By the time they reach the city, tens of thousands of people are with them. The march isn't just about taxes, it's a demand for equality. The rebels call for an end to serfdom, fair rent, and the abolition of poll taxes. They want a society where everyone has a chance to thrive. Modern parallel? Think about the Occupy Wall Street protests of 2011. That movement wasn't just about economic inequality. It was about exposing a system that felt rigged against ordinary people. And let's be honest, it was. Wat Tyler's March is Occupy Wall Street, Medieval Edition. When the rebels reach London, they don't hold back. They fucking tear that shit up. Any symbol of oppression, tore down. Prisons, emptied. Tax records, burned. Fuck yeah, I can get behind that shit. Corrupt officials, dragged into the street. But here's where things get messy. Some people go too far. Anyone associated with the elite was targeted, guilty or innocent. Watt tries his best to maintain order, but you can't control a mob of tens of thousands. It's nearly impossible. It's a reminder of how revolutions, then and now, can quickly spiral out of control. Think of the French Revolution. A fight for equality turned into the reign of terror. Even modern protests, like those during the Arab Spring, show how quickly hope can give way to chaos. Amid the chaos, a 14-year-old King Richard II agrees to meet Wat Tyler. It's a tense moment. Watt lays out his demands: an end to serfdom, fair taxes, justice for the poor, basically, human rights. At first, the king seems like he's willing to negotiate, but as Watt presses him for real change, things quickly take a deadly turn. One of the king's men stabs Watt during the meeting, killing him on the spot.
Oh!
It's unclear if this was a setup or it was planned. The rebels, leaderless and shocked, begin to scatter. The king promises to grant their demands, but quickly reneges once the crowd disperses. The revolt is crushed. Wat Tyler's death marks the end of a rebellion, but not the end of his legacy. The Peasants Revolt exposes the deep cracks in feudal society. Over the next few centuries, serfdom slowly disappears in England, and the seeds of democratic thought begin to sprout. Fast forward to today, you can see echoes of Watt's fight everywhere. Workers' rights movements, anti-tax protests, and campaigns for economic justice all trace their roots back to moments like this. Watt's story reminds us that change often starts with ordinary people who absolutely refuse to accept the status quo. So, how does Watt's story connect to the modern world? Just like in 1381, people today are still fighting against unfair systems. The wealth gap between the rich and the poor has reached medieval levels, sparking debates about taxation and social programs. From the labor strikes of the early 20th century to Black Lives Matter, grassroots movements continue to challenge entrenched power. Wat Tyler's betrayal by the king is a stark reminder of how promises made to the masses can be broken in an instant, a theme that plays out in modern politics daily. Wat Tyler may not have lived to see the change he fought for, but his legacy is alive in every protest, every march, and every demand for justice. If you've ever felt like the odds are stacked against you, remember Wat Tyler, a builder who stood up to a kingdom. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend or leave a review. It's the modern day equivalent of passing out leaflets in town square. See you next week. Until then, keep questioning, keep fighting, and remember, history is made by those who dare to defy it.